Okay, welcome everyone. So we are kicking off Ego today. We had a pretty big month last month covering manifestation. Have you guys been continuing to ponder on that? The three levels of manifestation. We started pretty simple, but we went quite deep and went three sessions in. So what was planned, what was outlined to be two sessions ended up being three sessions. But I assume that what was delivered in that session, in those sessions, will continue to come up as we talk about ego, as we continue to talk about wealth, love, all that stuff. I think we're gonna continuously weave into that. That's my feeling. I know we will be today. So before I get kicked off, those of you who are online, did you do any more pondering? Laura, have you caught up with it all yet? Or are you still catching up from your trip?
I've watched the first two and I started watching the third one, but I have to watch that again. So a little bit of catching up to do, but yeah, there was a lot of juicy stuff there.
The third one's where all the answers is in, Laura.
All right, perfect.
Okay, so has anyone else had any other pondering? Anything else, any revelations, that we haven't discussed that maybe we should discuss before we kind of put manifestation to bed? Okay, rightio. So, well, let's get into ego then. Such a tricky and trippy topic. I was watching the module of ego last night, and there was a couple of things that I was like, I listened to it. I can't even remember myself saying that, but I was like, oh, that's really good. And one thing in particular that really stood out for me, just right at the beginning, which really describes the ego, and that is that the ego is the shadow, and who you truly are, or oneness, is the light. Now, the shadow is not real in that metaphor. The shadow is there because of the light. Does that make sense? It's what's real is the light. Now, if you shine the light onto the shadow, what happens to the shadow? All right, yeah, that's some of you are like, yeah, it either disappears or it relocates to another position. That's the most, I was like, wow, did I say that? That's really good. Like what I got out of just listening to that for the first time, after I delivered it for the first time, is that, when you bring light onto the shadow disappears. In other words, the ego doesn't exist, right? But one thing that I thought about, which I'm discussing with you and we're starting to discuss with you right now, is that it in this game, the shadow does disappear, but it also relocates to a different position, doesn't it? You bring light, the shadow moves over there. You bring light over there, the shadow moves over there. And I was like, oh, that's good, because that's exactly what the ego does. It continuously repositions itself where it can't be found. And one of the other things I said in that talk, which again, I'm getting highlights out of it, I'm like, wow, that's really good stuff, if I say so myself, is the ego's greatest fear is to be found out. Like, this is stuff that you want to write down. Like, there's probably two. One thing is the shadow thing, just understanding what I didn't discuss in there is that the relocation of the shadow. I think what I just discussed is that when you bring light into the shadow is no longer there. So the shadow doesn't exist, right? But then I thought about it, I was like, it actually relocates. Potentially, that's what it does. And isn't that exactly what the ego does? It just moves. As you become more conscious, as I've always said, as you become more aware, your ego will seem to be more aware, because it will use it will use your point of view. It will use your words that you would normally use. So therefore, it's relocated into your new words, into your new understanding. So as you're using your new understanding or your new awareness, right, your ego's in there. Like, what a trip. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's, and that stuff, but we need to revisit, right? Something that I kept saying in that OMG module is like, you become very familiar with the ego, and you must get to know it. It's not about getting rid of it. It's about becoming familiar with it, just to know when it's there. That's all. Like, it's like, I don't say I have no ego, right? But I always say I tamed my ego. The ego is tamed. I used to be its bitch. Now it's my bitch. It's tamed. It's like a dog that has no, what do they call? What is it? Come on, someone up under the mic. Tame, not tame. Discipline. Dog train.
A dog that has no teeth.
Teeth? No, I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking the dog that when a dog is not disciplined, right?
Untrained. Not trained.
Yeah, untrained. I don't know what, but it. Just want to make sure my mail is off so it doesn't make any noise. So you're running around it. You are its bitch. Do you know what I mean? He or she is the master, and you are running around cleaning itself and whatever, right? But there's a point where the dog becomes disciplined and gets trained, right? The dog will still have some of the characteristics. It still wants to rip things up. It still wants to poo inside, it still wants to whatever. But when you have disciplined it, it won't. Does that make sense? And that's what happens to the ego, I'm the first person to say is like, the ego is still there for me. It's not like people think, oh, well, he must have no ego. No, it's there, but it's tamed. I just realized, I noticed it. I've got to know it so well, right, that I become familiar, and I still, to this day, go, ooh, that's a new hiding place you have there. Didn't see you there, eh? And to this day, I'm still finding new hiding places where the ego repositions itself or re-establishes itself. Okay? So makes it a very tricky game. One of the other things that I remembered what I said in that module is that, what was the quote? It was a powerful quote. Yeah, that's what it was. So you're either in joy or you're an ego. And I was like, ooh, I love that. Like, it really reveals to you how much ego you're actually in. Like, majority of the time, and I don't know, depending on yourself, right? Depending on your life and your ability to follow what's true for you and all that kind of stuff. Most people, many people, majority of the time, they're an ego. So you're either in joy or you're an ego. So in other words, you're either in the light or you're in the shadow, looking at the light. You're either in the light or you're in the shadow, looking at the light. Does that make sense? I think that really hit home for me when I heard that. Again, it's these are all just reminders before we dive right in. But it's you're either in joy or you're in ego. So yeah, that the shadow thing was super powerful. Something, like I said, I hadn't spoken about before, was the ego repositioning itself um, in a different area of your life, in a different voice, in a different awareness, in a different consciousness. And you just don't notice it. Okay. So what I would like to do is maybe over this month, explore the potential of where your ego may be hiding that you have not noticed. Okay, so that's the work that we're going to be doing together, is exploring where the ego is hiding. Now, the challenge there could be that your ego could be looking for where the ego is hiding. Doesn't work. Okay, it's a fantastic game, you know, an amazing game, right? So you have to become so familiar of when it is you as the ego that's looking for the ego. It's very simple. It's not that difficult. Some of you were like, well, if it's hiding and I don't know where it is, it feels different. Come on. You guys should know this. It feels different. You may not know where it's hiding, but when you are driven by the ego or when it is the ego that is perceiving, right, it feels different. How does it feel different? You're either in joy or you're in ego. Okay? What does it feel like when you're in joy? Okay? So that's the question I want you to write down. I'm glad all of you got pens and paper. This is different work. It looks like you're all taking notes. Write that question down. What does it feel like to be in joy? In joy. You know, my first company, before I started Be Free Events, it was called Enjoy Freedom. INJOY Freedom. Actually, that was Be Free Events' name, but I changed it because I thought it was too woo-woo. So I went from Enjoy Freedom to Be Free Events. So a little bit of a history there. So what does it feel like? And you really need to become familiar with that, because if you're not familiar with the ego, at least become familiar with what it feels like when with the absence of the ego. What does it feel like when you're in joy? So that could be when you're being joyful, when you're doing something that's joyful, when you're having an experience that is joyful. All right. Don't just go into the being. It could be doing something that's joyful. What does it feel when, and again, I'm not going to put words into your mind. You go and you come back to me and go, this is what it feels like when it's joy. Because if you know what it feels like when you're in joy, then you should become pretty clear about what it feels like when you're not in joy. So then I want you to write, after you've focused entirely on what it feels like to be in joy, maybe write 20, 30 different things. When you're being in joy, when you're doing something that's joyful, or when you're having a joyful experience, whatever, be, do, have, right? Write it down, fill that list up as much as you can before you go to the next question. Next question is, what does it feel like when you don't have joy? Okay, fill that list up. It should be that should be easier. What does it feel like when you're not in joy? All right. What you wrote in what it feels like when you're not in joy, that's what it feels like when you're in ego. Okay. So just remember, we go back to the feeling. It's a feeling thing, right? It feels different. Yes, the ego will manipulate, the shadow will move, it will reposition itself, it will redeliver itself, it will repackage itself. But one thing that you have is becoming present to what or how you feel. It feels different. So if you're not sure if it's ego or what does it feel like? It's a very basic, simple question. All right, but we need to go back to the basic here. Okay, what does it feel like? So once you're clear of that, then throughout the month, I want you to just keep looking for when you are in joy and when you're not. And look, just in case your mind goes into thinking being in joy is doing things that is light only, or doing things that you love only. Okay, remember Greg talked about the famous story in Italy, and he's talking about he didn't enjoy changing nappies. Okay, that's a good. That said, remember, because the ego goes, well, I don't enjoy that. Okay, you need to really ponder on that. Okay, and again, because the ego can easily come in here and go, well, that doesn't feel light. Yes, but go deeper and go, well, I don't know, you need to look for a deeper question. And maybe we can revisit that at the end. Nothing's coming to me right now, but just understand one thing. Open your mind to all possibilities, because your mind already starts to go, oh, okay, well, joy, what it feels like, this is when I'm in joy. And you're looking for, it's like when in WTF, when I tell people to do what they love to do, they immediately think what I'm saying is do what you love to do for money, which is fine. All right. That's the first thing. The second thing they think is, well, doing what I love to do is doing what's easy. No, incorrect. That's the ego in drive of their search. Okay. So I don't want you guys to make that same mistake here. You really want to ponder on, Greg's example was perfect. Greg's online now. He'll remember that, when he talked about, well, I don't enjoy cleaning nappies. I mean, here I am. I mean, I'm not bouncing out of bed to change a nappy, but I feel great when I do change his nappy. I feel great to be able to do that for Orlando. I feel great that he is in a clean nappy. So there's all this amazing feeling that I have in that process of changing nappy. But you could easily look at going, well, nobody enjoys changing nappy. Well, you need to ask a deeper question. You need to observe your process to see, do you really not enjoy changing nappies, or is it something that you actually do enjoy? Okay. So that's how honest you have to be with yourself. And to be honest, you have to open your mind, because the closed mind is only going to go, well, of course I don't enjoy changing nappies. Don't know. I'm not here to answer that question. What I'm asking you to do is open your mind to know that it's all possible, and observe the processes when you're doing something that you say you don't enjoy, just to ensure that you're clear. Okay, so those who have just come in a little bit late, I won't repeat it. You'll go back to the recording. It's a very important task for you to do this month. Okay, very important to become aware of when you're in ego or not, because it's too difficult to know if it's ego or not. It's more easier to know what it feels like when you're in ego, what it feels like when you're not in ego. So remember that you're either in joy or you're in ego. Love it. Great quote. Got to get that one out there. It's good. So yeah, that's a little bit of a powerful thing. That was probably the first 1 hour of the ego manifestation module that I watched. I got that much out of it. I was like, wow, okay, cool. So I wanted to just revisit that with you guys, and I'm sure you're seeing it with fresh eyes as I'm talking about it. Now, this is a question I have for you guys. Okay, so you've got your task, you've got your homework. Okay, I'll leave that with you. Okay, this is what I'd like to ask you. Back in manifestation, here we go, we're weaving back into last month. we asked a question, you know, one of the things we discussed anyway, right at the very beginning, the first session, right? Session 1 out of 3, you know, we discussed what it feels like when the ego is trying to manifest. Yes? You guys remember that? Head nodding. Yep. Awesome. Okay. So it's the first thing we discussed, because manifestation is such a powerful topic, but it's not powerful for the ego. Okay. The ego can't use it. All right. Or can it? That's a question that I want to ponder on. Right. Maybe it can. That's what we'll park that in a sec. But let's go to that first question. Right. What does it feel like? I don't know if that was a question I asked in the module, but anyway, what does it feel like when the ego is trying to manifest? Does anyone remember that conversation, that discussion? You can unmute yourself to chat. No one remembers. It was the most simple thing.
I remember you saying that when I'm sorry. Can you hear me okay? Because my mic kind of loud. Okay. I remember that conversation being about, well, when you manifest from ego, there's an agenda and there's need. Need was the critical term. Yeah.
Yes. Very good. Thank you. Thanks, Carolyn. Okay, so yeah, the ego is trying to manifest out of need, right? So that question that I'm going to ask you now is, well, what does that feel like, right? You guys already know what that feels like. So let's just go straight to the next question, right? Why? Why is the ego trying to manifest out of need? Or to simplify it for you, what is, write these questions down. I mean, if you know the answer, you don't need to write it down. You can just tell me. What is the ego? But Jamie, these are good facilitator questions. I'm sure you're picking that up. What is the ego trying to manifest? Let's get clear on that. Let's just make sure we're on the same page.
I was going to say, it's going to manifest duality so to exist.
It exists because of duality.
Yeah.
Right? It is given birth to itself because of duality. Mm-hmm. Right? To me, the ego is like, it's still a part of you, so therefore you don't get rid of it. But it's a part of you that you as the one has given a different role for. If you imagine yourself as the one being a spark of energy, the ego, anyone knows what a spark plug is here? Yeah, spark plug is what you have in your engine in the cars or in the aircraft, piston engines. And it's a little thing, like it looks like that, right? Most of you know what a spark plug is. You Google it later, right? And the spark jumps between this gap. There's a gap, right? And it's designed to ignite the fuel in the engine. To get the engine to continue to operate, it needs fuel and air and a spark. The ego is the spark jumping between the gap. Who you truly are is the spark. But the ego thinks it's only that little spark that needs to jump between the gap. The gap is duality. The gap is the duality existence. Okay? That is what the ego is. But remember, it's still the spark. But it thinks it's that tiny spark that needs to jump between these. That's its role. It's to jump between the separation. You might need to ponder on that a little bit. But it's still the spark. Or, if you want me to go back to basics, I was just trying to give you a different reference point. Sarah, you're trying to get the comfortable position going. All right, just try to find it because everyone can see that. It'd be distracting. the simplest way is, okay, the ego exists when you perceive to be the drop. Okay? But the drop is still the ocean. That's what I'm saying. Okay? It is your ego that perceives that the ego is something that's living in you and that you need to beat and kill. Then you might as well go to religion and study religion, because they'll just call the ego the devil. And then you need to beat the devil. It's like, do you understand? The ego is a part of you, all right? It's looking for the same thing as who you already are. So remember my mum with the retreat I talk about, my mum was at the retreat. I give you guys a little exercise. She's look at all these crazy people. I said, why are they crazy? She says, they're all the one looking for the one. Okay, so this is the first thing that people understood or understand when they come to ego, is realizing the ego is not a bad thing. It's just you've given it a role. Where you see the bad thing, or what you perceive as bad, or what you perceive as negative or ugly side of the ego, is when the ego will try to control and manipulate to ensure it gets what it wants. But without the ego getting what it wants, you wouldn't exist. So it needs to continuously manifest out of need. It's looking for something. Remember in the WTF experience, when I talk about the children that were put in a Nazi concentration camp and they were part of an experiment, the children that never received any love and affection, they died. But the children that did receive love and affection, they survived. So obviously, you know where I'm going with this. You guys have done the work quite a bit now, right? What is the ego looking for? And without it, you wouldn't survive. Now, I will add one more thing, just not to create any confusion. You no longer need the ego to look for that when you realize you are that. Okay? You no longer need the ego to look for that. In other words, the ego's voice or dominance dissipates and becomes so small. It's like I keep talking about the big German Shepherd or Doberman guard dog, and then suddenly it becomes a Chihuahua. It's still growling. It's still got his fangs out and going, "Arr," but it's cute now. Oh, are you a little upset? Are you Mr. Chihuahua? Do you know? That's what it's like. It's still there, but its dominance is no longer there. Right? Why? Because you realize that what the ego was looking for, you are.
Love.
Love. Yes. Love. Okay. I know we're at basic level still, but here's the most profound thing that I actually said in the OMG module. And I heard myself say that. I went, oh, that's really powerful. And I wrote it down for you. Okay, so yes, it's looking for love. And we talk about it all the time, that it's looking for love. And we say, in the WTF, sometimes I feel like you guys are on stage with me. It feels like, I always say that the ego is looking for love, but it's looking for the love in all the wrong places. It's looking for love in form, which is only experienced momentarily, right? So here's the thing. This is quoted from OMG, module 1. Module ego, I should say, video 1. Here's the quote. And you might want to write this down, because it definitely took me to the next level of the program. Even so, I delivered it. The love, the ego. So we just said the ego is looking for love. So here's the thing, what you need to understand about that. The love the ego is looking for is driven by fear. The fear of what? Before I finish out my statement. Okay, I'm just going to say that again. The love the ego is looking for is driven by fear. Yes, it's looking for love, but that love, which is the love that you experience in duality, don't just blame the ego here. that is the love that you experience in duality. Even, you know, whatever it may be, the love of when you find something that you really love to do, right? If it's driven by the ego, it's driven by fear. So I'll say that again. The love the ego is looking for is driven by fear.
Fear of death?
Well, that's something we spoke about in F2W, and maybe I'll bring this into this, but that's not the answer I'm looking for. That's going to open up a different can of worms, and maybe we'll need to go there in this session.
Well, then the fear of not being loved.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. The fear of not being loved. So write that down. Again, this was quoted from Amir from OMG. And I was like, what a great quote. The love the ego is looking for is driven by fear. The fear of not being loved. If you think about it, in duality, and go and listen to the module, there's this guy, Amir Zogi, who was talking to you. He was saying that in duality, there's equal positive and negative, right or wrong, good or bad, right? Now, something that I don't really mention in that module because it will mindfuck people, and I'm already mindfucking them in that ego module. So I just say, yes, there's equal positive and is equal negative. But you guys will know now, after doing so much work at this level, what do we know about the positive and negative? The energy that's positive or negative, what do we know about it?
It's actually neutral.
It's neutral. It's you're labeling it positive or negative. All right? Again, which part of you is labeling that? The ego, right? But in truth, right? When you say this is a wave of the ocean, then you've labeled it. But it's not really the wave of the ocean. It's actually the ocean forming itself as a wave. If you say this is the iceberg floating in the ocean, well, in truth, it's not really an iceberg floating in the ocean. It's actually the ocean taking the shape of the iceberg. Do you understand? So the ego labels it as positive and negative, but I can't say that to the guys who are just doing module 3 about ego because they're already like getting mind fucked. So I just say in that module, at that level, I just say the ego is playing or weaving its existence by labeling things as positive and negative. Now, and I say the positive and negative are equal. So even when the love, I'll come to you in a sec, Jamie, even when the ego is looking for love, you look at this statement that I made just there, the love the ego is looking for is driven by fear. The fear of not being loved. That's there. The opposite of love in this example is fear. So here's the ego trying to do what it loves to do to ensure that it is being loved in return. We know what kind of love that is, right? But that's the only love the ego knows. The ego thinks it's the spark that needs to jump between the 2 points. It doesn't know that it is the entire spark. All right? But you as the one gave it that role so you can experience separation. You can experience duality. So the love the ego is looking for is driven by fear, the fear of not being loved. That's the two opposites. It's playing the two opposites. It's using both spectrums at the same time in one moment. I was like, wow, that's powerful. I'm getting a lot out of this OMG. Mind you, I will remind you, my sister, as you guys know, is helping me put the whole OMG version 2 together. She's still going. She goes through this and sends me all these quotes, just like I'm like, did I say that? That's a really powerful quote. And it lands deeper within me. I'm like, like for example, the shadow. We just talked about the shadow. But now I'm like, well, hang on, the shadow's not just disappearing, it's relocating. And I was like, that's actually a more powerful metaphor. Do you know what I mean? Even I, watching it back for the first time in my life, am getting so much out of it. Don't get me wrong, I get more out of what we're talking about right now, though. So, Jamie, what were you saying?
You know how you say that you're just saying that you don't tell them that everything's neutral in OMG?
Yeah.
But don't we mention that? We mentioned that day one of WTF.
Yes, I know, but when we're just talking about ego, and I'm actually labeling it as, you know, this is positive or negative, right? Of course, even in that module, I do talk about when the positive and negative come together, it's neutral.
Yeah.
In reclaiming power, they understand when the positive and negative come together, it's neutral. But they don't right now need to know that it's neutral already.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
I don't want to, but hang on a sec. It's not neutral already because well, it is. It's just you've labeled it as not neutral.
Okay.
And that's what the ego is doing. It builds its identity through going, I'm having this negative experience. I'm having this positive experience. I'm having this negative experience. I'm having this positive experience. It builds its existence. Those experiences become part of who you are. So therefore, now you're weaving yourself in this story of positive and negative experiences. Right? And just even another thing, right? The other way the ego, you know, we talked about that, the ego beats itself up or builds itself up, right? The ego gives credit to something or blames something. Again, look, it's all duality. And it's all opposites. One other characteristics of the ego you I'm sure would be familiar about is that part of you that goes, I can't do it. You feel love to do something and then you're like, but I don't know if I could do this. I go back to my speaking. When the very first time I felt to speak this stuff, I wasn't even clear on what this stuff was. And I didn't even believe I could speak, right? So my ego was telling me all that, but who are you to speak? Da, 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 da. Right? So that is one part where the ego makes you very small, right? But it also makes you very big. Okay? Does that make sense? So in the opposite spectrum, on the flip side of the coin, I could have been thinking, I can do this. I'm so good, right? I'll give you an example. You've heard me talk about this example before. When I was speaking the Intuitive Warrior and I was doing it all around different cities of the world, and I did it multiple times, and I just became, I had it like it was my most powerful talk. WTF was powerful, don't get me wrong, but Intuitive Warrior, I used to nail that thing. You know, I had 2.5 hours, 3 hours, and I used to just get up there and I was just, like till this day, my most powerful video, I believe, is the talk, my very, very first Intuitive Warrior I ever did, which is the first one we recorded, which is that darker video, the one that you guys have probably seen. That is like, I was in my element. So long story short, after doing multiple Intuitive Warriors, Jamie, remember once you introduced me on stage, you know, we clapped hands, whatever, shake hands, and then you go, good luck, mate. And I go, I got it. It's in the bag. Okay? It's like, I don't need luck. I've got it. It's in the bag. Again, you know, it came to me when I thought I couldn't speak. It spoke to me and says, who are you to speak? But then now I'm speaking. I've got enough reference points that I'm so good. So then the ego relocates. The shadow moves up here and goes, yeah, you're good. You're fucking good. Like, you should be getting more money. You should, these guys should praise you. You know what? That's not what I was thinking. Okay. But I did think, this is what I'm good at. This is my, like, I'm good. Like, I'm the best speaker in the world. Right. I even said that. Like, there's no speaker like can speak what I can. I'm the best.
I remember that.
Right. So,
but then at the same time, it was funny. Shortly after you started getting feedback about the talks not being connected, I remember exactly the same time.
Well, exactly. Most people know the story, but if you don't know the story, that, you know, I had a couple of emails come back after that talk. That's right. I've never finished the story. In particular, after that talk, people emailed me and said, yeah, look, you know, I'll just give you, I don't really feel you're connected to what you're talking about. And you know, there's a couple of people, and, you know, usually if it's one person, sometimes it's some crazy guy or girl, but this was, you know, and I, you know, I'm pretty intuitive enough or connected enough to listen to if there's any charge behind what they're actually saying. And there wasn't. And I was like, really? You thought I wasn't connected to it? And I had to go and revisit what I did on stage and go over that process. This is like what I'm asking you guys to do in that homework. Go over that process and just make sure that there was no ego in that. And I went over the process, and the part that, you know, what that person wrote to me in the email resonated with me. It felt true, right? And B, when I went over the whole process of what I did on stage, and you know, you go through that with your mind without judgment. It's different. It's like pondering. You're observing your process, and you're going back in time and going, you know, what was I? Where was I doing? And then that one moment came to me where Jamie goes, "Good luck, mate." And I'm like, "It's in the bag. I got this." And I was just like, why did I say that? And then that led me to how I felt. And I felt different. I felt I could do it, but I was on steroids. Do you know what I mean? I had no, you know, sometimes, like, you know, before I go up on stage, I'll have energy building. To me, it's not nerves. Like, I don't feel nervous, but I can feel like I'm about to speak about something. I didn't have that day because I knew what I was going to speak about. I was going to speak about what I spoke about last time, because what I spoke about last time was so fucking great. So when Jamie goes, "Good luck," I go, "I got this. It's in the bag." Can you see what I mean? The ego moved into two different positions. Does that make sense? Again, some of this may be a reminder. Obviously, we are going deeper in the remembering, right? But again, I want to look for somewhere new that you haven't looked. I want you to shine that torch or that light in a place that you may have not looked at. Okay? I want to share with you probably the biggest way where your ego will manipulate, and well, probably the best way to put it is the biggest area where you have your power in. Okay? This is where your ego's, it's the place where you don't look. Remember in the movie Revolver, it talks about it hides in the place that you never thought it was there. The place, the very last place you would ever look, right? And we talk about that in the movie. And people always go, and I ask people always the question, where is the ego hiding? And everyone goes, in yourself, right? And I'm like, no, that's not what he said. He says, he actually does say, it's hiding in your pain, Jake. You need to embrace the pain. Embrace this pain and you will change this game. That was what actually said. No one hears that. When I ask people, because they just go to the typical answer and go, oh, it's the last place you ever look at is within yourself, right? But where within yourself? Behind the pain, right? Now I want to ask you another question, because a lot of you have resolved a lot of the pain. So where did it go now? Maybe some of you are resolving some pain still, I'm not sure. But this group seems to me that they've resolved a lot of the pain, you know? So if there's no more pain, you will change this game, right? But where'd the ego go then? Where does the ego hide next? That's the question. That's going to be the most powerful thing that we're going to get out of this session. Where does the ego go next? I'm not going to give you the answer, of course. We're going to be pondering on that, of course. But I will say that, you know, as you become more and more conscious and more aware, you know that the ego becomes and uses that awareness. I understand. But where is the ego hiding? As you become more and more conscious and more aware, and you have less and less emotional charges, the ego wasn't in your emotional charges. The ego was in your pain. So where's your ego gone? It's still there. You need to know where it went. You know, Amy had she's had a very amazing experience. Obviously, most of you know Amy's story. Like, there was a lot of pain she went through in the last few years, right? But you can see she's worked on herself. She's resolved it. okay, or she's resolving it. I don't know. What, I won't put my words in Amy's mouth, but where's the ego then moving? I've watched Amy. I can see it moving in her, moving, the ego's moving in a different place. I know exactly where it's, if you know, Amy, we had the last lunch meeting you and I had a few weeks back, a couple of weeks, we had lunch. I watched the ego move to a new place because you're amazing. What you have done and how you've resolved what's happened to you. Like, it's amazing. It's just, it's inspiration for everyone to watch what you've done, right? But now I'm watching, I had that lunch with you and I was like, look at the little thing, just move over here. Okay, so if you think about our conversation, you might actually get where the ego moves next. So, okay. So it's something that Jamie just brought up, was the fear of death, right? Those of you who were not in Spain, I'm just gonna visit this because I don't want it to be unsaid, and how deep we go into this part, I don't know, right? I'm not sure, because yeah, Jamie brought it up, so I'm gonna address it. So here's the thing: we spoke in Spain, for those who weren't in Spain, the FTW trip. The whole week we spoke about death. Okay. And when I first said to the guys, this week we're going to be speaking about death, everyone was just like, what? You know, death. Like, I'm here to be alive, right? I don't want to consider or ponder on death. And of course, it's not something that you would talk about to everyone. Most people don't want to speak about death, right? So what we talked about is, and I'm just going to give you the first surface part of it, and whether more comes up in the next sessions, I don't know, right? In the WTF, we realized that, you know, I always say that, you know, our greatest fear is, number one, the fear of public speaking, and number two, the fear of death. So we speak about it there, right? We say the number two fear is the fear of death. But the point was that something like greater than the fear of death, and really the fear of death is the fear of the unknown, right? And also, if you got a fear of death, you got the fear of living. So let's not just brush it aside here, right? But something that's far greater than death is the fear of public speaking. And as you guys know, I talk about in the WTF, and I say, what are you really fearing here? It's not public speaking, right? When you are public speaking, and again, this, if you're listening to me, will relate to the question I've just left for you to ponder, which is, where did your ego move to next? Or where is it moving to next? Where is it relocating? Okay. Where's the shadow now? Right. The fear of death, right? So yeah, so we in the WTF, we talk about, well, it's not really the fear of public speaking, it's the fear of rejection. Because not only are you speaking to one individual, you may be speaking to 500 or 5,000, or if maybe you're a celebrity and you're like millions of people. Okay. Suddenly there's this new fear, right? And again, it's what is it about public speaking? It's the fear of rejection. Now, not only one person can reject you, but 500, 5,000, 500,000, 5 million people, depending on what stage you're on, right, can reject you. So really what it is the fear of rejection. But we go one step deeper and go, well, what does it feel like when you're rejected? You feel like unloved. So really, it's not the fear of rejection. It's the fear of not being loved, right? We speak about that common conversation in WTF, right? But something we never go back to is, well, what about the second fear? The second greatest fear was the fear of death. We didn't speak about that, and we never have, because we just talked about the greatest fear. But if number two is the fear of death, maybe that should be spoken about as well, right? So that's why we spoke about it in Spain, because it was the number two fear. But what we actually also realized is how it can be the number one fear. And that's why Jamie said the ego's fear was, what was the quote? the love the ego is looking for is driven by fear. And Jamie said, the fear of dying. What would you say, Jamie? The fear of dying. Is that what you said? Okay. Now, what Jamie said is true. It is. The ego's greatest fear is dying. Okay? But I wanted to make this point over here because it lands easier when we talk about the fear of not being loved. But here's the thing. Remember I said the ego's greatest fear is being found out? Because if the ego is found out, it dies. Okay, so death for the ego. And again, at this point of the conversation, what I like to say is, as in many different spiritual texts and different teachings, they always say, you came here to die before you die. And what they mean by that, as you guys are fully aware, to die before you die means to have the death of the ego. Or in religious or Christianity or different teachings like that, I think it's Christianity, they will say to be reborn. Because when you're reborn, it's the death of the ego. Okay? Does that make sense? So I just wanted to talk about why Jamie just said what he said and why what he said is not incorrect. I just wanted to talk about the love part first. Okay? Now, whether we go and talk more deeper into that fear of death, I don't know. But at this stage, I will leave you with one more thing, right? And again, this is what I told the guys in Spain. This is why I said, this is why we spoke about death. Because I said to them, how many people, and I've talked about this in WTFs many times, how many people do you know that have had a near-death experience, right? And their life changes dramatically. Majority of those people who have a near-death experience, after their near-death experience, we'll talk about the near-death experience in a sec, but after the near-death experience, their life becomes all about, number one, doing what they love to do, being the person they love to be, sharing the time with the people they love. So it becomes about love, right? But more the real love, not the love of, or doing what you love in order to be loved, right? So love comes in and becomes a bigger player in their everyday living. And number two is what? Living for the moment. They start to think about, the future. Yeah, the future is going to happen, but it's about this moment. It's about living for now. Okay? So therefore, the question has to be asked, why? What happens to this person who has a near-death experience? It comes back and lives so truthfully. They only want to do what's true for them. They want to speak what's true for them. Maybe I'm speaking too much. Maybe I don't know. But they want to live in the moment, for the moment. They want to spend it with the people they love. They want to do all the things that they came here to do. Personally, I've had a near-death experience. Supposedly, I don't have too much reference of this, but it was when I was younger. And I never talk about it because I actually don't remember anything from it. Okay? It was my younger days when I took drugs. And I took drugs 2 days in a row. It was a Bendo's News Day. I passed out in a nightclub and they shut the whole nightclub down. I was gone. Ambulance came, took me, they resuscitated me. I remember just getting up in the ambulance and seeing my friends. One of my friends was with me in the ambulance and one of my friends was driving behind the ambulance. The other thing that I remember is being in the hospital where they ripped my shirt off and they gave me adrenaline or whatever. I don't know what they gave me, but I think it was that. They brought me back and I was like, and they said, what did you take? And I was like, oh, I took this and this and that. And then I went again. And then the next time I woke up, I just got out of bed and they went, no, sir, you got to sit down. I'm like, I'm fine. And I just walked out. I didn't get the report. I don't know what happened. And my mates were waiting outside and they were like, they were crying because they thought I had, could die or that, I don't know if I can't tell you. So I can't remember anything besides what I just shared with you. And when I walked out, I went, guys, let's keep partying. And they were like, no, we're going home. So I was not in a normal state, and I don't remember anything besides that. So yeah, that's my personal near-death experience. It's not that powerful. That's why I never share it, because I don't remember what happened. But, did my life change after that? Yeah, it did. Things slowly, not, did I take drugs after that? Yes, I still did. So when I say it changed slowly, it changed slowly. Okay. Do I take drugs now? No, I never do. I don't touch it. Okay. And that's a different story. Anyway, sidetracked for a second, right? But something takes place for the person. This person who's at a near-death experience, and I'm not really talking about myself because I can't remember it, but some people remember it, right? They are faced with death, right? And transcended or went past it, right? They faced their own death and moved forward. Okay, so that's why we spoke about death. All right, we spoke about death so you can overcome the fear of it, so you can truly be alive and And look, I don't know where that Jamie brought it up, and I just want to kind of give you the answer or share with you why we spoke about death in Spain. As I heard Neil Donald Walsh once say, and I always say it, if you got a fear of death, you got a fear of living. And I find that's very true. So yes, the ego's greatest fear is actually to die, because the moment it dies, it doesn't exist. You always hear me talking about the ego. The ego only knows form. It's jumping between the form. It is the space that jumps or sees the form. It's that spark. It jumps between. But if the ego were to look behind itself, where it's just emptiness, it's just one ocean, one energy, right? It has a fear of going into that emptiness or going to the unknown. Now, that unknown doesn't mean necessarily death. It means possibilities. The ego wants to know. It weaves its existence through the knowing, not through the unknowing. I always say, and I say this in the WTF, the ego is afraid to turn around and walk back into the emptiness. What happens if you walk into the emptiness? The ego doesn't exist anymore, because the ego exists because it knows itself as form. If there's no form, it doesn't exist. The closest thing I can give to you is, imagine you went to the moon in the future. They took you to the moon and then they lost you in the galaxy, and you're just floating in the emptiness of the universe. That's what the ego is afraid of. Okay? So it's a good point. So at this stage, I want to open up for some discussion.
You said the ego is the space between. Just then. Yes,
but it's not the space.
Yeah.
It is jumping between this.
I feel like the ego is only aware of form. That's why it freaks out. Like if I was to be dropped in the middle of an ocean right now, the one thing you would fear is the space.
Yeah.
Because
there's nothing.
Yeah, there's no reference. There's less reference points for the ego to exist.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Something I've been pondering on.
Yep.
Is the ego is almost like your ticket and your chaperone to the human experience. So I think that's where it kind of falls into that neutral territory, where we are actually creating it and asking it to be our guide in this experience. Like, get us into the trouble, like throw all this crap at us, like make us worry about things, because like that's what we're asking the ego to do, so that we can have this experience of, duality and then figure our way back. And then it's kind of like, where are we on that path is how much we listen to the ego, and then eventually if it goes from being your chaperone to you're the one chaperoning it, and like you're taking it where you want to go with it.
Yeah.
So I've had that shift to where it's like, it's once you get to the point where you're like, oh no, like I thought you were in charge, but I'm in charge. Come on along on the ride with me now, and like let's see what kind of trouble we can get into.
Yeah. And a perfect scene in the movie Revolver is right at the end when he gets out of before he gets out of the lift. It has its final battle with the inner voice that's basically telling him whatever, and then he says, "You don't control me. I control you. I own you." Right? And that's when the ego dies, if you like, or becomes the chihuahua. Does that make sense? You guys remember that scene? And then the door opens and he walks out, and the guy with the gun in front of him couldn't shoot him. Nobody can do anything to you, all right, if you are in joy.
I also like the bit in that scene where he's trying to get rid of the ego, like, and he shoots the ego and the ego like disappears. And
Yeah,
I'm still here.
Yeah, exactly. That's what happens. Like it's at the beginning. It's like, yeah, you think you got rid of it for a sec because you were, I don't know, you got on acid or you got on, what are the, ayahuasca or whatever. And then you have something that you help you to get rid of it, and you're like, oh my god, I had to. But then it's like, I'm back.
Yeah.
It's
like you can't get, like you're saying, you're not here to get rid of it, but only recognize the role of it. Then you can control it.
Well, yeah. Well, then you realize that you control it.
Okay.
There's nothing that you do to try to control it.
Okay, yeah.
Just realize, okay. Like, I don't know. That for me, that's what you've heard me talk about the ego and with some of the modules. With some of the newer guys, I'll probably be talking more about what I'm about to share with you now. And the moment where I stopped battling the ego. The moment I stopped battling the ego is when I started to live, started to be in the flow again, So yeah, that and you guys know what that moment was. That moment was when just in case you don't know, where I continued having this internal battle. And one of the biggest things I wanted to do was to ensure that I was doing what's true for me. And I wanted to no longer do what was out of ego or what was out of need. So I did nothing for a long time because I just kept going, is this ego? Is this need? Is this ego? And if I kept asking my question, is this ego or am I doing this out of need? Then I would find how it could be ego or how ultimately that this could be out of need. And I did nothing for 3 years. I still spoke and stuff, but I just couldn't. I felt in prison, right? I was very limited, and that's when I described that. I was in joy, like I was experiencing a joyful life, but I was like having the prison where I was having the penthouse in the prison. That's what I explained it to. Then I got to the point and when I'm fucking over this, I'm done. You know what? If I'm in ego, so fucking be it. I had friends would say something and go, "Oh, isn't that ego, Amir?" And I just got to a point. I went, "So, I'm done. If it's an ego, it's an ego. It's time to move." Do you understand? If I need to act or react out of it, like so be it. Like I don't know what happened there, but things started to shift. Did I start to do some things out of ego? Maybe slightly, but then it's almost like it came out of me. And after that, I just went back to, the ego just became a chihuahua, so I didn't try to control it. I don't know if you want, if I gave up is the right word, but I gave up the battle with it. It's like, I'm not battling with you anymore. Like if that's ego, I'm done with trying to work out what it is. If it's ego, then so be it. Then I'll learn that was ego. But sitting there for so long, not being clear what it was, it was a continual battle. Like, I refuse to do something that I don't love, and every time I wanted to do something, I'll feel like I love to do it, but then I was like, but hang on, do I need to do that? Well, yes, I do, because that's going to make me money. It's like, oh my God, it was it's the voice just keeps coming back around. And I could tell you a whole half an hour on that process, which I probably will with the newer guys. And that's what a lot of the guys go through when they first start OMG or when they first do WTF. That's the first process. They start to go, their process is, well, I only want to do what I love to do. But then they get confused and go, well, is this what I love to do? Because every time you do what you love to do, because that's the new awareness you have, to do what you love to do and let go. I don't want to do what I need to do, So then every time you feel inspired to do something and it's actually what you love to do and it's actually come from an infinite space, the ego comes and goes, well, do you really love that? Or are you doing that because you need to? Because aren't you making money from that? Or, aren't you getting recognition from that? And it brings up your own processes in something that actually is true for you to do. Can you see what I'm saying? So it just moves. And that's why I was like, you shifty little fucker. It's sneaky. It's sneaky, but very intelligent. Very intelligent. So, that's you'll learn as you go along. But to me, that was a pivotal point where I just went, fuck it, I just did. That's when I went and did Naked Truth. Those who remember that the video series that I did, Naked Truth, I was on a rampage. I was like, you know what, fuck it. Like, actually, the fuck it moment was way before I started B3 events, but I had another second fuck it moment, if you like. And I was just doing videos, and I don't know if you guys remember, but I almost wanted to know that I could do those videos and be criticized by some people for doing those videos. But I don't know if you guys remember, but I used to talk about it in OMG. I wanted to know if someone could stab me in my heart, I'd be still okay. Because sometimes someone will say something and will stab you in the heart by saying something, but I want to know I'm okay with that and I can still do it. Anyone remember that conversation in an OMG? Jamie?
Yeah, I think it's in love.
Hey?
I think it's in love, the love module.
Oh, the love module. Okay. Well, that's when I was just like, you know what? Take a stab. I want to know that I can withstand anything. So that was just a process. That was my process at that point. Isn't it funny that it was around module of love? I had no idea. So that's actually brilliant. So that's what my process was then. So, this is a slippery little sucker, as they say. But just understand it's got a role to do. Orlando comes home and he'll poo his nappy and he needs to be fed, or he'll get grumpy, or he'll tell, I'll walk in and he'll go, no, Dada, don't kiss me. Like, I'm not saying hello, or ignore me. That's his understanding. What are you going to do? Go, you little fucker, come give me a kiss. You know what I mean? Or go and clean up. You got to meet the baby where it's at. You got to meet the ego where it's at, right? If you don't want to fight it, all right? And remember, the part of you that wants to fight the ego is what? The ego. Okay, you guys know that. So it's an interesting thing. Okay, so
one quick thing on that.
Yes,
I've noticed that on my journey, like when I got a handle for like where my ego was and kind of like I finally saw it, I was like, oh, okay, now I understand what's going on. That's when then I had a kid and now I have like this other little ego running around to deal with. And it's almost like you level up, where it's like, oh, here's the next level of this video game where it's like not even your own stuff anymore. Now you get to deal with this other stuff outside of you that you really care about. And it's like, it creates a whole nother level of ego, which is really interesting.
To add what you're saying is really powerful, Greg, but to add further to what you're saying is, again, I talk about this in WTF, anything that you don't resolve or neutralize within yourself, or you don't get at peace at home with, or one with, whatever you want to call it, you pass it on to your children, right? And then you're like, this little fucking ego, right, is running around, but many times it's running around with stuff that you never resolved. So then you have to then, you can't deny it anymore. You can't go, well, I don't want to deal with that, or you suppress it, or you just ignore it. It's now in your child, and what do you do with your child? No matter what, you love it. You just have so much love for your child. And even if you see your own patterns or characteristics, that you don't like about yourself in your child, you're forced to love your child. Like you have no choice. So it's another opportunity if you see your own stuff in the child. So yeah, we pass it on to the next generation. So that's why we are continuously evolving and becoming more and more conscious, because we don't lose our consciousness as we become as an entity, as one entity. We're becoming more and more aware. We're passing on our awareness, our consciousness, our depth of consciousness, but we're also passing on our shit too. So the next generation will try to resolve that shit as one entity. All right, so the point of this session today was just to revisit the ego. I don't want you to think, and you guys shouldn't need to think about too much what, is that ego, is it not? I don't want you to get you back to, OMG, this is far deeper. This is for someone who's already finished OMG and has done all the work. So you don't need to go into this, hang on, am I doing that out of love? Am I doing that out of need? I don't want to place you in that position. I don't think you even need to be in that position, but someone who first starts needs to question those things. So the question is more, where's the ego moved to? It's got to go somewhere else, right? Where's the shadow gone to now? Okay. And that's what you want to ponder on. Okay. Amy, you've got a heads up because I've kind of gave you a clue. I've given you clues as we're going along. I've pointed things out. Maybe re-listen to this, or more importantly, just go away and ponder on yourself. That's the other thing I want to talk to you guys about, is the art of pondering. I know we may have mentioned or talked about it a little bit, but I actually maybe in the next session actually talk about how you ponder, or see if I can talk further about how you ponder, because this is one point where you don't want to bring your ego into your pondering, because you're just going to get a different version of the same thing. Okay. It's you really want to know what pondering feels like. That's why I asked you that question, and it's very important for you to do your homework. What does it feel like when you're in joy? What does it feel like when you're not in joy? Right? Because I'm leading you to pondering. Because guess what pondering feels like? Okay? I don't need to answer that. You know that, right? It's the same. When I'm in pondering mode, there's no ego. I feel joyful. In pondering, I feel joyful. Sometimes so joyful. And I'm pondering. I'm not meditating. I'm pondering. Okay? Because it just feels like connection to realizations, connection, reference points. And it's just, what do you feel in connection? Joy. Okay. It's very important that you become masterful in your pondering technique or ability, whatever word you want to call it. So next session, we will talk further about pondering. But in this session, I just wanted to revisit ego. We don't really need to dissect it. I'm not doing that. I'm not bringing all your attention on all your ego. No. All right. You know one thing. When you're either in joy or you're in ego. Okay. Go do your homework. What does it feel like to be in joy? What does it feel like not to be in joy? Okay. You'll become very familiar. Remember, if you are an ego, the voice that beats yourself up for being an ego is the ego, because the ego beats yourself up and it also builds yourself up. You're familiar with all that stuff, all right? So that's all child stuff. You already know that stuff. You should be able to catch yourself up when you're beating yourself up or building yourself up, or when you're giving credit to something or blaming something. That stuff you should be catching yourself out. That's easy, all right? That's a basic 101 ego, getting familiar with the ego's voice or getting familiar with the ego's personality. That's what it does. Right? More, the question is, where did you go now, little slippery sucker? And slippery sucker, it's cute. It's a chihuahua. Okay? So it's not like, I'm going to get you, motherfucker. It's not that. It's just, I say that for effect. Where does it go to? Like if And I know some, you have pain again in your life and different things, but the way you experience your pain and how you resolve your pain is very different for where you are right now. So it doesn't have a strong enough hiding in the pain. Okay? Unless you have some deep pain still, then it's probably just right there. You don't have to look very far. And that's why when someone first does the WTF, we point out where the ego is hiding. It's in the pain. But like I said, you resolve that and the pain is not so great, or there's no pain whatsoever. There's no process around the pain. And remember, people ask me and they go, do you still do the process, reclaiming process? And I'm like, no, right? I don't need to, right? Because I don't need to, it's not hiding there. There's nothing in there, right? It's more about placing your attention on the truth, which, again, we're going back to manifestation there. But I do from time to time see the little slippery sucker. I'm like, well, you've been hiding here for a while, have you? That's cute. And then we'll move somewhere else. Okay. But this is the next place I find that the ego moves after the pain. All right. After it knows it's going to get found out in the pain, it goes somewhere else. This is where it goes. Generally, this is what I find. I'm open to discuss anything else as well. If you went, well, actually, I found that it went here in this area of my life or in this thinking or whatever. But generally, I find it goes into this area, and it's the same area for everyone. So I'm not talking about, it's in money or relationship or in your health. No, I'm not talking about that. It's not in an area of life. It's in an area of how you perceive life. It's in an area of how you think. Okay, it's in your inner voice. You can hear it, right? But it goes somewhere where it's kind of really dark. There's no light there because your attention is always somewhere else. And because your attention is somewhere else, gets very dark in that corner. So that's why it's gone in that corner. But if you went and put your attention there, where your attention goes, you go. Where you go, the light goes. Good chat. Any final questions? You're clear on your homework? I guess the homework is to do the task that I've given you, right? I won't put it on the WhatsApp. The guys who should listen to this, who have missed out, and they can do the homework. But the pondering is, if it's not in the pain anymore, where is it? And again, when it is somewhere else, it's playing a role. And you can feel it. Remember? It feels different when it's the ego participating versus the one. It feels different. And when I say versus the one, versus it all coming together as one, the whole thing one. There's no ego in the one. There's only one. There's no drop in the ocean. There's just one. Okay, so don't start to think incorrectly here and go, oh, I'm the one, and then there's the ego. No, when there's only one, there's no such thing as ego. It doesn't exist. It exists only because it plays a role. It plays a role because you gave it a role to play. Just like everything in this entire universe has a role. All right.